Hello, founders. Welcome to Startups.com. We are live. Got a fantastic show for you today. I'm joined by my special guest, advisor, fellow founder, Tony Teshara. We will hear from him in just a moment. As always, joined by the illustrious Jen, who is our co-pilot today. Before we begin, just want to remind everyone that we want to answer your questions. So if you want to abscond this show, take it over and have your questions answered. Just type in the problem or the task that you're working on. We'll workshop it. We'll talk about it. We'll go back and forth. And who knows, maybe you'll be a guest on the show sometime. But if you got those questions, put them in the chat or the Q&A box. Jen's going to wonderfully facilitate those questions, rudely interrupt us as needed. We are going to get to it. Tony, welcome to the show. As always, you're back again. For those who have not met you yet, you're kind of a regular. You're one of our stalwarts, our staples in the Startups.com community, which appreciate everyone who's joined us from Startups.com. Thank you so much. Tony, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do, and how you help founders today.
Thanks for having me, Tony Teshara. I am CEO and founder of Handle, and basically we are a startup that advises other startups, particularly around talent management. So whether you're looking to hire your first CTO, scale up your team, we provide advice and insights as well as actually recruiting the talent for you. So whether it's developers, account executives, product managers, we work with you and your budget to make sure that we help you find, what's the best long and short-term solution. I'm a former multiple-time founder myself, started different SaaS startups, won some, lost some. So I have that unique perspective of looking at how to hire talent, not just from a straight hiring perspective, but more from a business objective, and understanding, hey, what are we trying to achieve here by hiring? So that's what I do.
That's great. We talk about this all the time, Tony, in terms of even going through the process of hiring your co-founder. And that's so important, co-founder fit, as well as talking about investors as well. You can apply the same principles. So we're going to cover a lot of that. We want to talk about first, though, before we jump in, if you have any questions, make sure you get them loaded up for Tony and I. This show, Startups.com, is brought to you by us. We have an amazing podcast called Startup Therapy, and it is hosted by Will Schroeder and Ryan Rattan. They are the respectively CEO, founder of Startups.com, and CMO and founding partner. They have a no BS conversation. We like to say this all the time, that a lot of what founders hear out in the news, popular media, what's on social media, is not necessarily the truth, and we like to talk about it with no holds barred BS approach. It's a great podcast. We have topics such as, should kids follow up in our founders' footsteps, following our founders' footsteps, evolution of entry-level workers, assume everyone will leave in year one. This one always got me, which is hilarious. Mark Zuckerberg tells a story about how they got an offer to sell Facebook to Yahoo for $1 billion. And he turned it down. His entire team left in that year. It was crazy. Was mortgaging my life worth it? Tony, is mortgaging our lives worth it to toil away in startups? Question for you.
Well, I just think it depends on what you're after, right? Because honestly, if I wasn't mortgaging away my life for my startup, I'd be mortgaging away my life for a 9 to 5. And I did that for years. So it's like one way or the other, you're having to pay. But I think I came to a realization a couple of years ago is that I don't know if I could ever want to go back to working for somebody else ever again.
Yeah, I say this all the time. People ask me, Ed, should I become a founder? And my first answer is no. Absolutely not. No way. Run in the other direction. It is not a good life. It is not the glamorous life that we talk about. The only reason you should do a startup is if it's in your blood and you can't possibly do anything else. I don't know about you, Tony, but as soon as you go through the startup cycle once, and you're in this world, you're talking about hiring and just, are you employable? I don't think that we are employable, generally speaking, after we get through a startup. Like, let's say a startup goes and it folds, and we're a founder. I don't think we're employable anymore.
Well, the first thing I tell candidates who maybe were former founders is we probably need to update your titles and massage your experience a little bit, because you do become a little radioactive in that sense of, you were a founder and a CEO and now, but I was really just a CEO of one, right? So it's like, okay, well, we gotta work that title back, right? But no, I agree that being a founder, it's not for everyone. A lot of people that I talk to is they did it because there's just not much else to do on the marketplace, right? They realize, hey, I can't find a job, so I might as well create a job for myself. So whether it's a product or a service, they end up kind of falling into it by chance or circumstance. And many of them didn't dream of becoming an entrepreneur. They just sort of like the path kind of led that way. And this is where they're at.
Yeah, and if it fits, that's great.
Yeah.
If you're in the audience or you're watching this on the interwebs, on social media, any of our channels, would love to hear. Put in a comment. Why are you a founder? Could you see yourself doing anything else? Why not just go get a regular job? Jen, I'm going to point this to you. I know you don't like talking, but we're just going to drag you into this conversation. You've watched me advise hundreds of founders over the years. By the way, Jen is my executive operations. She just got married. Congratulations. She took a few days off, which made me realize she has more job security than ever, and I was struggling without her. But congratulations and kudos. Husband is a very lucky man. But Jen, you've watched us advise founders over the years. Would you ever become a founder? In your opinion, what is your opinion about people who become founders?
Is not in my blood.
Not in your. Why not? Why not?
I just don't have the desire. And I think part of it comes from growing up in a family business, going to work, talking about work, coming home, you're sitting around the table, you talk about work. And I've seen the unhealthy dynamic of it. I'm about to see the healthy side of it as my husband is a farmer and works with his family all day, all night. So I'm sure I'll see a different side of it then, but I think I just have a very skewed view of it. And I like to be able to just work. And I will, as Ed knows, I will work into the evenings. I'll work whatever hours a day, it doesn't matter, but I would like to be able to work. And then once I turn my computer off, I don't have to think about it ever again. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you can't turn it off. Tony, how do you do it? Or do you do it? Because it's 24/7. Like you are in this job 24/7. My family recognizes it. That is one of the detractors. What do you do?
Yeah, well, when I figure that out, I'll let you know, right? But, I mean, it's definitely gotten better over the year, trying to set boundaries for myself. And, I think one of the big things that I always kind of preach to people in the marketplace or startups hiring is we've used the term work-life balance for so long that I don't even think it applies anymore, right? I like to use the term, work-life flexibility. And the reason is because our lives are so frenetic now, right? Both, mom and dad work. We got to run kids to school, the doctor's appointments. We've got, to let the cable guy in. And so really what it comes down to is I might need to take 2 hours off in the morning to go do some stuff. But that just means that I'll probably be back online at 7 o'clock after the kids go to bed. And I think creating that idea, the balance of like, hey, there's going to be some times where I'm going to work a little more. Sometimes, and it's not often, I'll work a little less. And then hopefully it all sort of nets out. But I mean, there's many a time where I'll be slacking other founders like at 10:30 at night because I'm trying to create something on Figma or Adobe. I'm trying to learn and upskill, and so because during business hours, I'm talking to clients. And so it's like after hours is where I'm doing all the creative stuff, like the marketing and the create, because it's got to get done. And then like the glamorous life of a meeting Top Ramen and Gatorade while I'm like, trying to get this stuff done. So yeah, if you want to become a founder, just realize, it's a tough road, but I mean, it's fun.
It can be worth it for sure, especially if you like the freedom. But let me just do a public service announcement for the founders who are watching here. If you have an investor, you do not get to advocate for work-life balance. You get to advocate for things being fair, which is important. But if you have an investor and investors come in and got 20% of the company, and you could possibly grow your company in a unicorn, $1 billion, and you are going to experience all the spoils of that, and you do that right, you don't get to say, I want work-life balance because they gave you their money. There's a cost of opportunity. They could easily put in the market. They're taking a risk. That's their livelihood as well. You owe it to them to put everything that you possibly can in your startup. However, you have to be wise. You cannot mortgage your own life to the point where it's detrimental to the startup, because then you're not actually fulfilling your obligations. So if you work yourself to the bone and you can't actually perform in your startup, well, then now you're totally screwed everybody. But when you have an investor, everything changes. And I don't think a lot of founders quite understand how that dynamic shifts as soon as you take that first check. Tony, what's been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, investment changes everything. And, I know you'll agree with this. The number one request that we hear from founders in the community is, I'm here to like try to find investors, right? It's it's like top of the list, right?
That is it.
And it just becomes like, it opens up an entirely new set of more complex problems and challenges, right? We think, oh, I got to check, we're cruising now. And it's just, No, you're being held accountable by other people who are financially involved, and it becomes more challenging in that sense. And investors, VCs in particular, they're going to look at how you are structured for the long run because they realize it too. They see founder burnout. And if you're a one man, one woman operation, you think like my plan is I'm just going to keep working, working, working. They're not going to find you overly investable because they realize that you can't keep this up forever. And that's why oftentimes they hope that you have some sort of co-founder to kind of shoulder the load. So it's just one of those things where having a really succinct plan of like, here are the milestones and what we're going to do within reason, you have to like map it out for them, right? Just going in with a hope and a prayer, and I'm going to work really hard and we're going to do all these things. It's not going to provide investor confidence. And honestly, you will just burn out faster.
100%. And I'm just going to be straightforward. If someone is a solo founder, depending on Tony's point, I start to worry if I'm going to recommend to investor, or I'm sitting there, I got to present to investor committee, or I'm the general partner and I'm responsible for writing a check of LP's money. Single founders are worrisome. They worry me. Now, some totally impress me and I'm like, okay, we can hire people, etc. But it's just because of the natural load that goes into startups, right?
Well, especially if they're a first time founder and
Oh,
they've never done it before, right? I mean, that they need extra guardrails, but it presents an interesting question because, I get asked all the time, do I need a co-founder? And I'm like, well, right, there's not a right or wrong answer. It depends.
I got a founder right now, and I've been advising him for years now, and he's solo. He has a family member helping him and really kind of a silent financial person, but he constantly is talking about co-founder and trying to actually get me on his team, which whole other story, full disclosure. But I get it. I actually consider it, and I think about it because it's that much work, especially because he's impressed me that he's gotten like $500,000 in revenue by himself over the last couple of years. Totally cool, right? Yeah. Jen, I saw the comments light up. We got a comment
From Chris, just said nothing like the feeling of vision coming to life and then going live.
And that is something that a lot of founders love experiencing, right? Working on a vision and then saying, hey, I can make it happen. That's so gratifying, especially founders who are driven by a purpose. They want to solve a problem instead of, oh, I'm just going to make some money or I got nothing else to do. They care about that. Kudos, Chris. Thanks for sharing. Make sure everyone get your questions in. Tony, I wanted to talk quickly about fundraising. That's always a hot topic. Let's do one for you and one for me. Okay, so here's the question I'm going to ask is, how do you show investors that you've got the right team? And how do you get that team that investors will be impressed with versus, oh, got some guy off the street, or, oh, this is a convenient person? What do investors want to look for? And how would you advise a founder to round out that team?
So I think, anytime you're going into an investment presentation, you become a storyteller, right? And what you have to do is you have to be able to paint a picture of what the enterprise looks like as a whole, right? And I think there's a bunch of different contributing pieces that go into that, right? And that makeup. And one of the first things that investors are going to look at is like, okay, where is everyone strong? And then where are the gaps within the team and the leadership? And are they balanced out, right? So if we see that we've got 3 very technical co-founders, but nobody is really kind of focused on the go-to-market strategy, how to be a good operator, how to kind of drive things to that next level working with the customers. That creates a lot of pause because there's no doubt you could probably build a beautiful product that functions really well, but if you can't sell it, then that becomes a huge red flag, right? So I think that's one component, is making sure like, hey, do you have all your bases covered? I think subject matter expertise and background, right? So it's really like, where have you worked in the past? Have you worked for other startups? Have you come from the Googles or the Ubers of the world? Creates a lot of confidence. Now, I'll say that doesn't always mean that they're going to be very good at being a founder.
Sure.
Right. But it does give a level of, okay, those are tough places to work and excel. So it does help a lot. And then the other piece as well is just kind of, what is the plan to continue to expand with the team, right? So whether it's having the right advisors on board that are focused within the niche industries, right? So if I'm working in, ed tech, that's where I'm going after. Do I have the right advisory team on there? Because what I want to know as an investor is, okay, I've given you my money. What's the path forward to successfully penetrate it and expand upon the traction that you've already created?
Let's talk about an example. Google. Tony, you sparked this. Larry Page, Sergey Brin, 2 techies. total techies, right? They just decided, hey, we think we can do a better job at helping people search and indexing the World Wide Web. Google's the behemoth. It's Alphabet now. It was Larry Page. He was the first CEO. They were tech guys, and they really hit their stride, though, when they hired their first CEO, which was Schmidt. So Eric Schmidt took over and really pump that up because this was a business guy that was coming in, right? And so investors want to see that you know how to build a team to round out the team, make sure you're not just hiring a bunch of tech bros that all of you do the same thing. And what happens is founders that can't do that, investors will actually start to question. So I had a founder, curious how you'd address this, Tony. I had a founder who built a great product, was getting good traction, and had sales, great customer acquisition costs, could nail it, exactly knew their return on ad spend, all that stuff, right? Great kid. Love that kid. Self-taught. He was in front of an investor, could have written the check that he needed, and he'd been raising money. But they said to him, we don't believe that you can hire the right team to scale this all the way. We haven't seen you grab that landmark hire, that one executive, steal him away from another venture, or have someone with such a pedigree be convinced to come over. He was kind of playing small ball with like B-list actors, and they want to see him go and hire an A-lister, and he couldn't. There was resistance from him getting that investment check. What would you do?
Well, funnily enough, because this is what I do, is I would go work with like a really, really good advisor or recruiter that can kind of help bring that A-list player, because, you know, a good recruiter is honestly worth its weight in gold, because really they become an extension of your business and they help advocate. And basically what they do is they sell the vision of the founder to that talent and back and forth, and brings them together. They're a connector, right? And so, you know, when I hear these stories about founders who haven't been able to find the right talent, it's not surprising, because, you know, sometimes we're so close to the business and working in it that sometimes it's hard to focus on some of the strategic components as well, just from a bandwidth perspective. And so having the, you know, kind of the wherewithal to know I need to tap into resources, whether it's an advisor or my network, to really kind of help me find that next piece to scale the business, I think is a really, really savvy move.
100%. Jen, I see questions coming in. I'll let you get those prepped. I want to make a comment on this. And I'm going to touch on a sensitive topic because I see that we've got women founders in the audience, and I want to speak to this directly. I had a story of a founder, and I was helping her raise capital, smart as a whip. I'd go work for her any day of the week. Totally amazing. And I've mentored young female entrepreneurs who become CEOs of big companies and mentor them to this day. And I believe and I flat out, I'm going to say it, I'm not trying to win brownie points, but I believe any woman can outcompete any man in the boardroom when it comes to a startup because of empathy, and being sexist, but I think women have a specific type of empathy that men we just gloss over, and just their perspective and their ability to nurture a company and create better solutions, I think, for certain types of things. I've seen it happen, and I've seen good, solid returns for investors. But the truth of the matter is that a lot of that is based on signal bias or recency bias in what people are looking at investors. And I have lots of people complain, yeah, investors are just a whole bunch of old white dudes sitting in a room, want to be part of the club, and they're used to investing in a certain way. And I get it. At the same time, there are certain things that you have to have as an executive, that sense, because this investor, we got her to the senior partner and the last due diligence, and she was doing great. But he just said flat out, we don't see you leading and managing, right? She wasn't sending off the right signals. And I had to coach her, and I had to say, listen, you got to kind of be a hard ass a little bit and really push him on some stuff and push back. And if you do all these things and he still doesn't want to invest, well, then he's not the investor for you. But we all need to learn those executive skills to be able to get that team, to be able to manage, to be able to have influence and inspire and share stories and be authentic in the boardroom and talk to investors and the board, at the same time defend your people and shelter them from all the pressure of the public markets, if that's what you're dealing with, public opinion. All that goes into you as a founder, and investors are looking at that and they're imagining you leading a team of 3,000 people because you need to go unicorn. That's what it all boils down to, Tony.
Yeah, I think you raised a lot of, interesting points there. I think first off, it's really exciting to see, more diversity in a lot of the VC groups out there. Like they're skewing younger. We're getting away from kind of that classic over 50 white male demographic. And I think we're starting to see that reflective in emerging VC firms. And I think they're looking for diversity in their founders and just increasing that opportunity. The other thing as well is like, one of the first things I did years ago is like I hired myself an executive coach that I see, once a month. And that's been really valuable because I'm smart enough to know what I know, but I'm also smart enough to know what I don't know. And that's been a big thing for me is like, okay, where are my gaps? Because again, we usually have some sort of singular background, right? So my background was sales. I wasn't technical at all, right? Just like somebody might be technical and they might not be an operator. And so having the ability to become more well-rounded, and we have to be able to do that is it's a skill that we have to learn and handling yourself in a board presence. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be necessarily like a larger than life personality, but I think it's having the confidence to believe in yourself and what you're trying to create and saying, you know what, that's okay. If you're an investor and you don't believe I can do it, I don't want your money anyway. Exactly. I will go to somebody else that will. There's plenty of people out there that will do this.
Right on. And we have the amazing pleasure, like I just look at the people who are in our audience, the mix of founders, minorities of all different shapes and sizes. I've seen them come, I've seen them go. My only thing is don't act entitled just because you're part of this minority class. Doesn't mean we're going to treat you any special. It's still a meritocracy, but you have equal right and equal opportunity to show your stuff. And if you're out there and you are struggling and you are running headfirst into this type of stuff, I'm going to tell you, just let us know. We're going to support you. We'll spend extra time coaching you. It's the great thing. Jen, we got some questions. What's going on the chatter?
All right. So we got 2 questions here from Lillian saying, I'm a solo non-technical founder, meaning that she's still producing a big portion of the product. And I've been told both narratives. Some say I need a technical co-founder since I'm in the software business, and others say my tech isn't that complicated. I can probably figure it out myself and hire the right people. It's a simple automation mechanism so far with a few AI APIs. Thoughts on this? How do I know at what point my tech becomes too difficult to do myself?
Let me fire the first salvo here. And then Tony, we can go back and forth. Feel free to play devil's advocate because it's not a simple answer. The reason that us investors and those of us who work with investors want you to be technical is because spending money on hiring a dev shop. This is the reason I send people to Tony. And I say, if you can stretch your budget and actually hire an employee, it's going to serve you a lot better than hiring a dev shop that's got overhead and all those things. I've heard so many times dev shops hold a founder over the barrel, hold their thing hostage. So I'm an investor and I give you, let's say $250,000 and you go and you basically spend it on dev shop. Now I'm paying somebody else's shareholders to make money. And we don't have control. What prevents that dev shop from shutting down, prioritizing another client, and then try to squeeze every bit of profitability? The incentives aren't aligned. They are going to try to get you the best product they can for the least amount of work so they can increase their margins. Where an employee, if you manage them correctly, is going to try to get you the best product they can, squeezing the most out of every single hour so they stay employed. Incentives are different. And then when you've got your MVP up and running and you haven't coded it yourself and you need changes, let's say you made a mistake. Let's say every single MVP takes twice as long, twice as much money to put out there. Let's say you goofed on something and now you got to go back and renegotiate and they say, no, this isn't going to work and someone misinterpreted. They're not having your back. They didn't actually look at some of the data and help you with customer discovery. So you've coded the wrong thing. They send you the wrong signals. They say, oh yeah, put all this bells and whistles in. Oh yeah, put AI in there. Oh yeah, put it on blockchain. We can do that. And it took you down the wrong path. Now, when I give you another $500,000, most of my money is going to go fix that technical debt. That's the biggest fear that we have as investors or in the investment community. Now, with that being said, Tony, you and I both know that there are non-technical people who put up amazing MVPs, and I would be completely acting in bad faith, speaking on both sides of my mouth, because I'm a non-technical founder. I actually did hire a dev shop, then I hired a CTO, and I interviewed down at Y Combinator for the solution, and I did sell my SaaS platform, and I'm non-technical, so I know the other side exists. What would you say to counter my argument, Tony?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I would say to Lillian's question, it depends on the stage of where you're at with the MVP, right? Where it's perfectly okay if you feel like you can code something to basically say, like, I'm trying to develop a prototype so we can, have proof of concept and show that, we're developing product market fit, and maybe we're only trying to raise $25 to $50,000 to prove something out, right? It's when we start getting to the next level that the questions come in as far as technical expertise. And that's the question I think we want to think about is, do investors want you to have a CTO, or do investors want you to have technical expertise?
Good
Because
question.
there are two different things, right? Because a CTO is very, very strategic in addition to being hands-on keyboard. Whereas if the concern is, I don't know if the product is built technically sound enough to feel like it's scalable, that's a different question altogether, because I know plenty of non-technical founders who what they did was they went and hired employee number one, who was a developer, and they basically helped scale it. And then they moved into a CTO role as the position evolved and the company evolved, right? The other thing is you want to think about is, if you're busy coding, if I'm an investor, I'm like, well, who's going to go sell? Who's going to go handle the other? You can't. We go back to that founder burnout we talked about earlier, right? You can't do it all, and it's just not sustainable. When it comes to dev shops, yes, there are some very reputable ones out there, but the overhead is huge. And
Massive.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, they're a for-profit business as well, but the markups are astronomical. So I am a huge proponent of, if you can hire directly to the source and you can do it fractionally, you can do it globally. There's a lot of economical ways to maximize your capital to get something built without having to, sell a farm. Because the reality is, if you go hunting for a CTO, that means you're giving up equity. And the equity is like your last piece of like cachet that you want to give up, because it's like a marriage. If it's not a good fit, then it's going to be very, very hard to get out of, right? So I always say, it's like, hey, find somebody technical that you trust from your network, vet the hell out of them, get references. If you've worked with them in the past, even better. Really make sure you do your homework. Work with them on a small project. Say like, hey, I need a feature done on this. Let's see how we mesh together. Scale it from there to the point where you feel like, hey, I feel good about this. I don't know how you feel about this. Do you want to come in like long term? And then that's how you organically do that. Because you go on LinkedIn, or you go on one comment and say, I'm looking for a CTO. They're going to come out of the woodwork and basically try to take advantage. Especially, they're going to dazzle you with a bunch of technical jargon. You're like, oh, it sounds good, but I don't know how to validate this. And it's just, you don't want to get in that trouble. So, Lillian, what I would say is, it depends on your stage. And I think it's more about having a plan in place for technical expertise to be able to support, say, like, we've got it covered.
I would second that and say it's going to depend. You're going to know, and I like the way that you delineated between, the strategy CTO and the technical expertise. Let me throw out a plan for everybody who's here watching. If you're non-technical, it's going to be a clip, telling our editor, clip this, okay? We're going to put this into a package. If I had to do it all over again as a non-technical founder, and I had $100,000, let's just take an even round number, because that's actually what I did. Is I sold my solution for my SaaS platform as a manual consulting offering till I made about $135,000, $145,000. And I put it all in the bank. I was working a full-time job doing this, but I learned so much. So I have $100,000 in the bank. In hindsight, what I would have done is I would have gone and found a potential co-founder who's technical. I would have said, this is the problem I want to solve. What do you think? And I will literally give you half of the company, except, but vesting schedules and cliffs. All right. So you're not going to get anything for year one. I'm not going to get anything for year one. We have to be in a year, and then a 4-year vesting schedule, and you get 25%. So we got 1 year. Then I would take my $100,000 and I would go to someone like Tony. And I'm not saying this just because I'm trying to promote Tony, even though Tony's great to work with. Lots of great feedback from people using Tony's services. But I would go to Tony and say, Tony, I need to find a technical person, someone who's just going to code full time in this to solve this problem. And we're thinking about doing this. And I'm going to get from my CTO, here's the language we're going to use and this and that. And I'm going to say, we need to build an MVP. And I'm going to stretch out my budget over 12 months. And I'm going to say, yeah. And in the meantime, while this full-time person is building and clacking away, The CTO is managing. I am out there just pounding the pavement. I am pounding the bushes, and I'm selling the stuffing out of this and continue to sell those consulting services and bringing in the revenue. And then if everything works, best case scenario, and I'll go through best case and worst case scenario. Best case scenario, this employee rocks it, all right? And I get to invite this employee, hey, come in for, we got an ESOP program. We're setting aside 20% of our shares. You can earn that. Congratulations. Now we can employ you for many, many years to come. Thank you very much. That employee's probably freelancing and, doing some other things, from a developing country, right? Because I can stretch my dollar out. And then my CTO says, I really appreciate the way that we rolled this year. I love it. I'm ready to stay in. Let me take my 25%. I'd make sure that as a CEO, I have the ability to hire and fire, including co-founders, right? And we have a separation agreement, et cetera. But now I've got traction and an investor comes in and I tell them the story. I say, look, here's what we did. I made this money. I'm selling right now. The co-founders were working for nothing right now. We put all our money into bringing in the technical team. We can hire a team, look at what they've done, look at our traction. Now I'm ready to take $500,000 to go to the next level. Best case scenario. Worst case scenario, I fired or laid off the employee in month 3 because it's not working out. And my CTO and we part ways and we say, nice try. It didn't work. And no shares have been vested, anything like that. And that to me would be the safe way. That's how I would do it right now. I don't have the energy, the mental fortitude. I'm too old. I'm on the back nine of my career, so I'm not going to do this. But feel free to use that plan. Tony, how would you do it, or what adjustments to my plan would you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about insulating yourself against as much risk as possible. Yeah, I would agree with most of that plan. The one thing I would add on there is, and we often forget about this, is we so focus on the development portion of things. We don't spend enough time in the design period, right? The number one reason scope creep goes up in developing an MVP is because there's not good requirements to start.
Yes.
And literally it's a blueprint where I can hand it to a developer and say, build me this, right? It's like when you buy a Lego set and there's no instructions, right? I don't know what to do. So I highly always encourage when I'm meeting new founders who've never built before is take a month. I bet you take a month, work with a UX UI designer, whether it's a mobile app or a web app, or let's get everything out of your head and on there so we can make sure, is this feasible? Because then from a design perspective, we can pare it down to a true MVP and say, what is the one feature we need to do? And then it becomes that much faster and more economical to build. Because dev shops, and here's what I say, is anybody's going to use a dev shop. If they're not talking about a design period, red flag, because that means they are just going to run up the bill because developers are not designers and designers are not developers. So make sure you're interviewing any dev shop, ask them about how they go about making sure that they give you a comprehensive design.
And if you're talking to a CTO or potential co-founder, that they respect that. That's stuff that I'd rely on the technical person for and say, hey, this. If they don't have the chops to manage the process, like design phase, then why do I need you as a technical co-founder? I could probably just hire somebody else out to do that. So great point. Amazing. Good discussion so far. Jen, what are some of the other comments that are coming in?
We do have another question, which is talking about hiring a lot. When do you know when to fire someone, especially someone who can't seem to grow as quickly as the business?
Fire them fast.
How fast, Tony?
So it depends on what, if it's a culture thing, right? I'm an advocate of exiting them out of the business fast, because if you have a team and it's not a good culture fit, it can seep into the culture very, very quickly. And the rest of the team is watching you. If it's a technical component, I would still be pretty quick because your runway and your capital is pretty short. You need to make sure that, and I used this phrase last time and Ed never heard of it before, but, inspect what you expect.
Yeah, that's a good one. I loved it.
And so many times I see founders, they hire somebody and like, okay, I'll check in with you in a couple of weeks. And I thought they were doing what they were supposed to do. And then I find out, we're behind on things or we're not hitting our numbers. And now it's catastrophic. It should be regularly checking in on milestones that it starts with you as the founder is like, okay, if you don't have milestones set up, people aren't going to know what to do, right? The number one thing, and I experienced this firsthand back when I was in sales, transitioning off of founder-led sales often is a nightmare because they don't have playbooks. They're like, I just went and talked to my buddy who I golfed with and he threw me a contract and we scaled from there. But there's no go-to-market playbook, right? And so they're like, okay, now I want to bring on an account executive to kind of extend in there. You bring them on there, they don't know what to do. They don't know the market. They don't know how to approach things. you're wasting your money. And what happens is you end up firing that employee, right? So you need to start with having your processes in place, making sure that it's scalable, and then making sure you utilize as much automation and AI as possible to say, okay, I've done all the groundwork, all the foundations laid, bring them in. And that becomes much more clear if they're not performing to say, okay, this is not the right fit.
Let's add to that. You can save yourself a lot of headache by hiring slower so that you don't have to fire. And that's what I do is I will do what Tony said, make it a project, make it freelance, make it a contractor, and literally go week to week or project to project or month to month if I'm feeling really generous. And then if it doesn't work out, Jen has seen it. Jen has seen people come and go in our operation sooner than later. And here's the reality. Everyone, listen, I saw a Reddit post and the title was lazy co-founder, okay?
Yeah,
and all the comments, and I'm going to do a series. I swear I can do a series of bad advice from Reddit and good advice, like the comment section in Reddit, commentary advisory. But as soon as you have to write that and start talking about it, that person is already fired. Like as soon as you start having to talk about a co-founder or an employee, should we fire them? They are already fired. You're just delaying the inevitable because for some reason or other, maybe it's emotional, maybe you don't deal with confrontation very well, maybe you're just plain lazy, maybe you haven't learned and it's a great time to do it. But as soon as you have to have this conversation, I tell founders this all the time, as soon as you come to me and say, yeah, we're thinking that it's not working out with this co-founder or this employee, I'm like, it's already done. It's just a matter of how you're going to do it. Or what is the rescue plan, the Hail Mary? And I ask them, I say, this is a do or die moment. You're either going to do a Hail Mary and you are going to put it all on the line and say, we're going to rescue this employee. If not, everybody's going to agree they're going to part ways. Or you just get it done. Just take your dog out to the back behind the woodshed. Jen's a dog owner. I can see her grimacing, type thing. But that's literally how drastic it gets. Go take your dogs out back and just, it's a mercy. Just put one right between the eyes.
And I hear that all the time when I talk to, a founder who says, I'm having difficulties with conversations with my co-founder and we're just starting out. And I just ask them, like, is this the right fit? Because what are you going to do when things get real and things get tougher? You can't have those conversations now. What's it going to be like in 12 months when you potentially have investment? Right? If you're not aligned on things like investment, go-to-market strategy. And the other thing too, and this one really, really annoys me, when I hear, well, I have a technical co-founder, but they're not involved in any of the sales. Stop right there. Anybody in the organization is in sales, right? I don't care if you're the developer, you're in sales. You're the CTO, you're in sales. Everyone is selling. If you feel like I just want to stay in my product laboratory and build, you shouldn't be a co-founder. You should go get a job. Everyone should be selling the vision, talking to customers, that thing, because if a CTO is talking to customers, they're getting that information firsthand, and that's going to make them that much better on the product.
Exactly. It's that continual feedback. Not saying your technical co-founder has to put on a suit, call through the phone book, but I've seen founders send strong signals to their CTO and their engineering team. They will literally, this is what they did. They took the phone. This is when there's central phones. They took the phone for customer service and they put it right in the middle of the bullpen of all the coding people and said, you answer the customer service, you answer those calls. And that made them realize, oh, wait a second, maybe we should listen to customers because we don't want to take those calls anymore. And it's like, yeah, neither does the organization. So listen to your customers. That is part of doing sales. Good stuff. Jen, what else?
Lillian was making a couple of comments here based on your discussions before about non-technical co-founders. She does have a fractional CTO at the moment.
Fantastic.
And she had commented on a story that it was exactly what happened to her. And she was the co-founder lab and lost faith at YC.
Absolutely. Okay. We had I see a note, keep me anonymous. Okay. We're gonna keep the comments anonymous from this point on. We're putting up the wall. But I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt, and this is the reason, talking to someone like Tony, where a lot of founders come our way and they say, I need help fundraising. I need help building my MVP. Co-founders are the number one reason outside of product market fit that startups will tank. It's just hands down. Because once you have product market fit and everything's rolling, it's yours to lose. You pretty much, if you screw up, if you get product market fit and your startup folds, it is totally 100% on the team's fault. Maybe you got investor pressure, but it's up to the team to push back on that because you've already got product market fit. You should be able to defend that. And what happens is co-founders deal with all this pressure and all this stress, and then all that friction happens, and then it falls apart. And let me tell you, I have been through some of the most painful divorces, one particularly that brought me here to startup therapy. It brought up so much trauma. I had to go through therapy and, all this stuff. And because it was made worse after we took in $250,000 worth of investment. After. It's the worst feeling in the world to be fighting with your co-founder and have investors breathing down your neck. And holy cow, was it ever a beating that I took.
I'll share a story as well. We took in a couple of years ago, $250,000, and my co-founder was technical. And just the exact story that I told you before was he wanted to stay in the product lab, developing, designing, and he was doing it slow. We wanted it to be perfect. And this was my first go around really as, a founder, and I learned so much, but it created so much stress in my life of like, I'm trying to go sell something that is not built, is not fully formulated. And I've got an investor on my ass trying to say, where's the sales? Where are the sales, right? I ended up in the hospital for 4 days just from exhaustion and like having a nervous breakdown that I walked away, right? And I would learn so much. And sometimes we have to experience them for ourselves because we can sit here and we can talk about it ad nauseum but it's not until you actually go through it that you realize it. And you can always tell the difference between a first-time founder and a second-time founder because you learn so much that first go-around.
It's like parenting. I say, I'll never do that as a parent. I would never, blah, 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 this and that, until you're like a parent and you're like, holy crap. It's a completely different feeling.
My first kid, I watch all the time. My third kid's at 3 a.m. out in the streets. I'm like, she's fine. She's fine.
That's great.
I am that third kid, so I feel that.
Yeah. Long leash. Yeah, Jen will tell you. Jen, we got other questions. Let's rapid fire these questions. If people got questions, let's do a bullet round.
Yes, it looks like we got one more in right now, which is, what is your hiring order?
Hiring order. Please expand. What do you mean hiring order? Or was there more expansion on that?
I don't see expansion at the moment, but I am guessing that if it's just you as a founder and have a co-founder, who's the next person that you should be hiring?
I mean, it depends on function, but I'm of the mind of anything that's going to help generate revenue is always going to be of the first order, because without revenue or some sort of traction, it doesn't matter how good your product is.
Yes. Or, okay, I'm going to rebuttal that just a little bit. Personally, I used to be like that. I used to say, okay, let's bring in someone who can assist with sales. So let's get someone traction. But I've learned that I am the best salesperson for my stuff. And this is going to be big kudos to Jen. Jen originally came on the team as a part-time virtual assistant. She was working another job, and then things started to go well. And then we talked about her jumping full-time, and then she moved into executive operations. The leverage that I now have to make better money for the startup or do better as far as be the front runner out there, the rainmaker, is exponentially increased because of an executive assistant or an administrator or someone to do operations. And Jen, in the beginning, and she's still a great price. Truthfully, she's worth way more than I pay her. But in the beginning, I could only pay her so much, and she did really great and gave me an ROI that we could build off of and those systems. So for me personally, if you're a small co-founder team, the first person that I would hire is someone who can administrate and help you get to those sales. If you're not built like that and you're not the number one salesperson, I usually am the number one salesperson, then hire someone who's going to assist you with those sales. Not a sales VP, okay? Not someone who says, I need to hire a team. You need to hire someone who can actually go out, pound the pavement, do demos, get in front of customers, pick up the phone, smile and dial, because too many people, I think, get lazy. They don't want to do that, and they want to be, quote, strategic, and I want to build the department, and you need to give me a budget. I need to hire 3 people and have a marketing person, a social media person. No, you want someone who's got rocket fuel in their veins, who's like, I'm going to be like a wild dog going out there and hunting to prove that I can sell.
That's why I said revenue. I didn't say sales.
Oh, good one.
Right. So revenue can be from customer retainment, right? It can be from all sorts of things. That's why we're seeing a shift to more of a CRO type role in startups that are scaling and versus like VP of sales, because now when we're looking at revenue attainment, it's on renewals, it's on partnerships, things like that, right?
Success. Like a success person.
So and it can gleam into like operations in that aspect, right? So sales enablement. So it's not necessarily sales. The other thing I was going to say to your point as well is I agree. And like, don't bring on like a VP or director of sales because it's just a BS title in the beginning. One of the quickest ways, if you want to start driving revenue, and that's really economical, and I had a lot of success with this with Handle, is a referral program.
Nice.
Right.
Yep.
Right. It's basically a pay for play program because even if you're hiring BDRs, SDRs, the delta between ramping them up and getting them ready versus when they're ready to perform, you've already spent a lot of capital on that. So early stages, I would look at how do you monetize your network in like referral programs to say like, hey, bring business this way. I'll have a profit sharing program with you, something like that, just to get the ball rolling. And it becomes relatively low risk to do something like that.
Nice. Okay, we got time for one more question.
All right. Unless you can answer this in 60 seconds, Tony. Can
Go.
you list a few other hiring mistakes that would potentially hurt future fundraising? Example, hiring only B quality candidates, like mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I mean, don't hire too fast, don't commit too much. So, again, contracts, being able to hire fast, fire fast. If it's not a good fit, you're not going to know. People can dazzle you in an interview, but you're just not going to know until you get in there. So, yeah, any way that you can mitigate risk by just like, trial assignments, contracts, working agreements, things like that. If it's not a fit, you just exit them right out.
Put a nail in this one here and just explain it from a standpoint of investors. You are going to have to defend your cap table. So if you bring on a wonky hire, give them a wonky salary, and you give them tons of equity, that investor is going to make you defend your cap table. And if you do not have a good excuse that makes business sense, then you're not going to get that investor. So just think ahead of time. Every decision you make when you hire, if you need to raise future rounds, you're going to have to defend your cap table and defend every single dollar and what you put in to these employees. So that's going to change the way that you hire right in the beginning.
I would rather be generous in providing compensation the way of like commissions. If I were to bring on like a salesperson and something that would incentivize them versus like a high base and a bunch of equity, like it's multiple components, but that's how you insulate yourself against just like blowing through your capital. Make them basically perform to make their money.
Okay, Jen, do we have another question we can answer in 60 seconds or are we good?
We do. We got one more. What is your process like for interviewing developers? Do you ask them logical questions or just straightforward resume experience? How do you actually tell if someone's smart and good at what they do?
Let me answer in 30 seconds and then you add.
Go.
Because I'm non-technical, when I interview a technical person, I don't ask any technical questions. I ask questions about culture fit, how they handle conflict resolution. Then I bring in a technical person to ask the technical questions, and then I ask their opinion, and then I make them do a project, and I say, let's try something together, and I have the technical person give me their feedback, and then I see how did I work with them, how did they engage with me, what's the chemistry like, and the technical person signs off on their work. That's how I do it.
Yeah, I would co-sign that. I just say it's like, hey, beware technical tests because they're not usually reflective of somebody's true aptitude. I think it can give you kind of insights, but they're not necessarily a real world application because it's like when you go take something in high school, you're not going to use that knowledge 20 years in the real world.
Thank you, Tony. That was great. Thank you to everyone who asked those questions. Fabulous discussion. Tony, as always, we're going to have you on as a regular guest because team building is such an important thing. Thank you to all of you who are part of Startups.com community for your support, being part of the community. You make this a wonderful place. We enjoy you very much. Tony, what's the invitation for people to get a hold of you?
So I hold office hours. You can find me on the Startups.com portal. I'm all over LinkedIn. And then my website is www.buildwithhandle.com.
We'll put all that information in the show notes as well as Tony's LinkedIn so you can get a hold of him. Thank you, everyone. Jen, as always, thanks for being nimble on your feet with those questions. We are here every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Every Tuesday, we do pitch decks. Wednesdays and Thursdays, we cover different topics. We got guests. We're going to be doing things like Am I Fundable, Marketing Makeover, Getting Traction, Angel Investors, you name it. We got so many of those things coming up. Thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you in the next episode.